I'd like to speak about 20 or 30 minutes and then leave the rest of the time for discussion. If in the course of my sort of disconcert, in the course of my remarks, if you have any questions, please ask them. There's no need to wait until the very end. I'm supposed to talk about the situation in Lithuania after the elections. As most of you probably know, the elections are still taking place, so there are no definitive results. But what does seem to be likely, and what seems to have been likely for the last 2 or 3 years, is that there will be a change in government. The sort of the current right-of-center government, which I think did quite a good job in controlling the financial, the fallout of the economic crisis, is likely to be voted out, because if anyone asks themselves whether you are better off now than you were 4 years ago, very few people could say that. I mean, the government is not at fault for this, but this is the way of the world. The elections the first round of elections took place 2 weeks ago, and basically the so-called left-of-center coalition had received the most votes. It consists of the Labour Party, which is a populist party founded by a Russian businessman, Beczka, the Social Democrats, which are the sort of reformed neo-communists, and also this party, Kęstutis, Order and Justice, which was founded by the former impeached president of Lithuania. They formed a kind of populist left-of-center government, and they came in, the Labour Party came in with 20% of the vote, the Social Democrats about 18%, and the Order and Justice a disappointing 7%. But at the end of the day, out of the 70 allocated seats, according to the multiple mandate, they have 38. The Conservatives, who people thought would be crushed, and I was one of them, and I was wrong, got a surprising 15% of the vote and basically dominated in Vilnius and Kaunas. They've been dominating in Kaunas since the very beginning. They pretty much have a clean sweep in Vilnius, which is somewhat surprising. They're sort of, their right-of-center Liberal Party, the Liberal Union, it's the party of the Besser-Verdiener parties, like the FDP in Germany, which obviously and openly, blatantly supports the better off. It's violently opposed to any kind of progressive taxation. It's calling for a ceiling on social security payments and whatnot. But basically they ended up, the likely coalition ended up with 38 votes, the former coalition with 20. And you had two outriders. You had this path of courage, the Sociales, which is a unique phenomenon which I think is unrepeatable and hopefully will not be repeated. It's a kind of a protest vote based on pedophilia, supposed pedophilia, murder, and whatnot. If you don't know anything about it, I won't even attempt to explain it. It is a horrible mess, but they basically ended up getting 8% of the vote, and the Polish Union, which in this case was a little bit, for the first time, formally allied with a Russian party, also got 5.83%. The first time it has crossed the 5% barrier. In 2000, they had something like 3.5. In 2004, they had 4.2. 2008, the last elections, they had 4.58. It was fairly clear that they were going to pass the 5% barrier, and they will win a couple of. They've already won one seat, and will probably win another 3 seats in the single mandate districts. So basically, now in the runoff, there'll be a runoff for 70 seats, and among that, I mean, it's likely the Conservatives have 35 candidates in the second round, and 23 of them are leading. So there is a real possibility. There is a real possibility that the Conservatives can still end up as the second largest party. But even if the sun shines and the Lord is favorable to both the Conservatives and the Liberal Union, I do not imagine them getting more than 45 seats. 45 seats out of 140 is not the basis of a coalition. There is some loose talk about the possibility of that somehow the Social Democrats or the Labour Party would be willing to form a coalition with the Conservatives, and I think that is extremely unlikely. It is unlikely for a number of reasons. First of all, the Labour Party is a very unique party. It is still, it has been charged with shadowy financing. The Uspaskich and other members have been charged with in the election of 2004, having hidden 24 million lithai of funds. This is an indication of the quality of Lithuanian justice, that the case hasn't moved forward in 6 or 7 years, but they have that strike against them. Uspaskich also, when he was under pressure and thought he would be arrested, he fled to Russia, although he stayed there for about a year and a half. And after 17 members of his party came to a press conference in Moscow where they accused the Lithuanian government of persecuting him. It is not every politician who seeks refuge in Putin's Russia. And the final matter is that in the recent elections, they have been accused of vote buying, and one of their candidates, and because of this vote buying in one of the elections has been annulled. But basically, because of these three factors, it would be absolutely impossible, I think, for the Conservatives to try to make a deal with the Labour Party. And I think the last nail in the coffin was the corruption in the elections that took place 2 weeks ago. It would be very hard for the Conservatives to team up with the Labour Party, because in doing so they would also be sending a signal as if vote stealing really doesn't matter much. The other possibility is would be some kind of agreement with the Social Democrats, but basically the Social Democrats are the successors of the former Communist Party, which was much more liberal than elsewhere in the Soviet Union. But at the end of the day, you have 20 years of enmity, which is not going to be moved aside. Among the other thing is the other problem is, not problem, but the fact is that the Conservative Party is a very difficult party. It has had more internal squabbling than most other parties. They've had offshoots, they had splinter movements, people move in and out. 3 or 4 or 5 of their deputies moved to the crazy party and have challenged the Socialis, and they have challenged conservative deputies. So I think, and because of its sort of truculent mood in the fact that it would be a difficult partner, no one is likely to offer them a coalition. So the two questions: will they be offered a coalition by either the Labour Party or the Social Democrats? I think the answer is no. Whether they would accept, which is another, if offered, would they accept? I also think no. So basically we're going to have, I think, a three-party coalition: the Labour Party, the Social Democratic Party, and the law and order kind of thing. And again, it will be basically left of center. But that said, will there be large changes? Will there be major changes in Lithuanian politics? And I think the answer is no. I think the changes will be very few for a number of reasons. First of all, as far as foreign policy is concerned, foreign policy, I mean, the Lithuanian, according to the Lithuanian constitution, the president, the president is in charge of foreign policy, he's in charge of security policy, he's also in charge of justice. Grybauskaitė has clearly made it clear that she is going to, retain the lead hand in formulating foreign policy. Moreover, Lithuania's foreign policy to some degree is locked in. It considers itself a staunch member of the European Union, a staunch member of NATO, and therefore the Western orientation will not change, even if you had 10 Uspaskichs in the government. So what can you expect? What can you expect? So Grybauskaitė, again, Grybauskaitė, as far as relations are concerned, close ties with the EU will predominate. Grybauskaitė, when she was president, she thought the government was too favorably disposed toward the United States. She has criticized the United States. She famously refused to go to a meeting in Prague where, on the invitation of President Obama, one of the ambassadors sort of smilingly said about a week later, said, "I'm a very important man. I have shaken the hand of the woman who has refused to shake the hand of Obama." But the sort of anti-American animosity it shouldn't be exaggerated. I think she made a point to show her kind of independence, but also since she was a European, she was a commissioner in the EU, so she's very anxious to emphasize the European aspect of her policy. And again, an interesting kind of point of view, interesting minor thing is that when you have the meetings of the European Council, she always represents Lithuania. The Prime Minister never does so. I remember in Poland, I think about 4 or 5 years ago, there was a disagreement between the President and the Prime Minister of who would represent Poland in the European Council. I think at one time maybe even both of them flew in, and they had to sort it out in Brussels. I may be wrong on that, but I know there's been disagreement about that. So basically, as far as the Western orientation, the most important thing, other than the EU and the US, the movement is towards Scandinavia. Lithuania, and I think Latvia and Estonia have all decided that a Scandinavian orientation is the most important sort of new tendency in their foreign policy, and there's even talk about forming a 5+3. The 5 northern countries plus the 3 Baltic countries. The problem with that is that the Scandinavian countries are somewhat less enthusiastic for various reasons. And one of the reasons is that the Baltic countries, despite the sort of standard belief that they are a bloc, they are not. Ties are cordial, but they are not extremely warm. And there is the fear that, as one ambassador told me, that the 5+3 will become 5+1+1+1, and therefore the Scandinavian countries would have to sit there and watch as the Baltic countries try to iron out their difficulties. But the Scandinavian angle, I think, is there, and it's a very important one. The ties with Poland, very quickly, I think will depend on Poland itself. I am of the view that the Polish government, in particular Sikorski, are primarily responsible for the strained state of relations. If they are willing to better ties, I think Lithuania would be willing to do so. Sikorski has several times said that with the coming of a new government, there is possibility for improved ties. If he was smart enough to make believe that the new government is favorable and made some kind of offer, some kind of suggestion that some of the animosity should be put aside, I think he's likely to get a relatively positive response. But again, I don't think the new government will be in a position to reach out, because Grybauskaitė has also had what she thinks that she's been not properly treated by the Polish authorities. Now, talking about the East, about Russia and Belarus, basically there is some belief that, for example, that the new government, the left of center government, may try to improve ties with Russia. The ties aren't bad, but go quite a bit further in trying to improve relations with Russia and Belarus, primarily for economic reasons. Both the Social Democrats, a lot of them are former communist factory directors, nomenclatura, they have businesses. Uspaskich is a multi-millionaire. His party also contains a lot of businessmen. For them, trade with the East is very important as trade with the West. So therefore, improved ties would be something they would seek, but they're not going to get. I think one of the points, a clear point, is that Russia dictates how far relations will go, how much they will improve. There was a very tense period between 2006 and 2008 when Lithuania was criticizing Russia even more strongly than Poland was doing under the brothers. But it's eased a little bit. They've had some meetings, but Russia has made perfectly clear that there is a limit to how far ties can go. A year ago, when you had the 20th anniversary of the treaty that Lithuania signed in 1991 with the Russian Federation, then headed by Yeltsin, there was an exchange of letters, and Medvedev came out just writing to Grybauskaitė that more or less that Lithuania doesn't behave in a friendly fashion towards Russia, therefore ties cannot improve, and pointed out some ways, mentioned the kinds of concessions Lithuania would have to make for improving ties, and of course they are impossible concessions. For example, no longer, changing its attitude and no longer demanding compensation for the Soviet occupation, or also not trying to unbundle the gas supplies and things like that. So no matter how flirtatious the new government may be, I think they'll get a very cold shoulder from Putin. Relations will be correct, they will be formally correct, but they won't move forward will not move a lot further they will not improve much over what we have now. again, because of Russia's decision. Again, Belarus is a touchy question. Lithuania has some doubts about the vigorousness of the vigor that EU countries are anxious to apply sanctions to Belarus. And their argument is, we border Belarus. For us, Belarus is important. The people in Portugal probably don't even know where Belarus is. Therefore, that Lithuania does support, you know, they have not gone against the sanctions that have been put in place by the EU, but they would preferably like them to ease somewhat, at least as far as trade is concerned. But again, I think any attempts to improve ties will falter, because basically you cannot predict what Lukashenko will do. Lukashenko, again, when you have this, I think if you didn't hear about this, there was this a group of Swedish journalists or human rights activists, you know, got in a plane, flew over Belarus from Lithuania, and dropped little teddy bears down with signs against Lukashenko. Lukashenko was incensed, started blaming Lithuania and whatnot. But the point is, he is unpredictable, and so in that field there won't be very many major changes. Now, as far as domestic policy is concerned, again, I conceive of limited changes, for two reasons. First of all, Lithuania is part of the EU. Fiscal austerity, fiscal discipline is absolutely at the top of the agenda in the EU as a whole. Lithuania will be signing on, or has already signed off on the new treaty on fiscal austerity, so that will place limits on the largesse of the new government. The second thing is that the President Grybauskaitė, who at the end of the day started supporting the government that's in power and that is likely to leave, she has supported them and came out with very high praise for their fiscal programs, for the fact that they controlled the effects of the crisis. And she has stated several times that she expects continuity and expects financial discipline from the new parties. And again, she has veto power. She is Lithuania's most popular politician. So for a new government to come in and to challenge her directly would be a little bit unwise. I can imagine circumstances where this would take place, but on fiscal matters, I think not too much. Now the other thing, but there will be some changes. Uspaskich, okay, Lithuania's minimum wage is 850 litai, which, and the litas is 3.45 litai make up a euro, so you can do the math yourself. But it's basically a little bit more than 200 euros. Uspaskich has said that he will raise the minimum wage in 2 years to 1,509. Notice the scientific exactitude. It's not to 1,500, it's not to 1,600, it's to 1,509, not 5,108 or 5,110, but basically, again, game plan. But there is no way you can come close to doubling the minimum wage without major follow-up. But since he's placed so much emphasis on this, I think he will try to move to increase it up to 1,000 litai, maybe up to 1,000 litai perhaps, maybe a little bit more. But they will be trying to do this without budgeting, but breaking the budget. The Social Democrats, in contrast, have called for the introduction of progressive taxes. Again, the Social Democrats are unique, I think, among the social democratic parties that they have been in power in 12 years, and in 12 years they did not manage to institute progressive taxation. This is unique, and it shows again how completely a nomenclatura party it has been.